Hey everyone, Greg Woodward here, and this is your weekly win. In this brief video, we're going to unpack a simple technique that you can apply to your cold calls to make them flow. More specifically, we're going to explore how to use this technique to transition from one point of the call to the next in a way that doesn't sound forced, awkward, or mechanical. If you distill it down, there's usually three main parts to a successful cold call. You have the intro, the why they care, and the ask. There's a time and a place for each part, and each has its own job to do, so ultimately, you want to lead your prospects through the parts in sequential order. Where a lot of sales reps get stuck is how to effectively transition from one part to the next in a way that seems natural. The first thing to really understand is that for your cold call to flow, you need to remove all friction that might otherwise distract your prospect from being present with you in the discussion. If your prospect becomes confused about where the conversation's going, then you'll likely get tripped up and not be able to guide them through the call. Well, one way to avoid this when speaking with your prospects on the phone is with a technique I call labeling, okay? And this is when you label what the next step is immediately before transitioning into it. Think about it like the GPS in your car or on your phone. If your GPS system gave you no directions at all and only announced when you arrived at your destination, you'd be pretty confused, and you'd probably spend most of the car ride wondering where you're going, right? And that wouldn't be paying attention to the drive. So your GPS works because it systematically walks you through the steps to arrive at your destination. For instance, like 400 feet, turn left. So you know the left turn is coming up. And that's the same sensation that you really need to achieve with prospects on a call. Labeling will help your prospect's brain form an image representing what the next part of the call looks like, okay? And when that happens, your prospect is more likely to remain focused and present with you in the discussion. And this is a great way for us to seamlessly transition through each part of our call. As we transition from the intro to the why they care, using a label helps us to frame up the next part of the discussion, right? The next phase of the conversation. For example, some labels you can use when leading up to a transition could include things like, I'm just calling with a question, do you have a minute? And then get right to the question. By outlining the action we're going to take immediately before we take that action, it keeps our prospects more engaged and focused. Another example might be saying something like, the reason for my call, and then transition into the reason. Or the results we're seeing are significant, for example, and then go right into some case study examples. Okay? There's also another crucial component to remember here when we transition. It's not just about what you're saying, it's also about how you're saying it. Okay? To effectively lead a prospect through a cold call, our transitions need to sound smooth and natural in order to be effective. And this is one of the easiest places for us to really make an impact with our speech cadence. We want to sound as natural as possible as we transition so that our interactions with prospects are more conversational. It may sound like a subtle nuance here, but a truly effective way to do this is by accelerating your cadence leading up to using your label at the point of transition. When speaking naturally, people tend to do this anyway, right? At certain points, like when they're excited about something or when they're leading up to a transition. And you don't want to lose that dynamic on your cold calls because having it adds dimension and it makes it easier to flow from one point to the next. So this makes the transitions feel more natural and sound less mechanical. For example, if you want to use this labeling technique to transition into the reason for your call, then you can say exactly that using an accelerated speech pattern leading up to your label. So something like, hi Nick, my name's Greg Woodward. I lead the partnerships team at NewCo. We're an employee engagement platform for HR executives. But the reason for my call, or if you're calling with a specific question, you could say something like, hi Nick, my name's Greg Woodward from NewCo. We're an employee engagement platform for HR executives. Just calling with a question, do you have a minute? And then go right into it, right into the question. And when you're ready to transition to the why they care part, maybe you're going to share some resonance points in the context of social proof, then leading up to that transition, you could say something like, the results we're seeing are significant, for example, and then go right into it. Finally, for the last part, or the ask, or your call to action section, you can do the same thing. The transition to the ask is a great place to circle back to some of your prospects' pain points. This not only shows that you were engaged with the conversation, but it's an opportunity for you to reinforce how your product or solution can solve a problem for your prospect. So you could say something like, well, based on your feedback about employee retention, it sounds to me like this would be worth taking a closer look at. So if it's an option, I'd like to carve out some time next week for a demo. We've got Tuesday and Wednesday afternoon wide open. How's your calendar look? And when we're able to seamlessly transition through each part of a cold call, our conversations are more effective, more genuine, and we're better able to communicate with our prospects. And when that happens, we win.